Hello and welcome to Conversations about Language Teaching. I'm Dr. Diane Neubauer, she, her,
And I'm Dr. Reed Riggs, he, him.
and today we're going to talk about purposes for picture talk. But before we jump into that, we have a little bit of some wrap up of the whole season to do, just a few minutes to do some housekeeping things, as we like to say in this sort of setting. One of those things is to say thank you for listening. It's been very encouraging to Reed and I to see people's comments on episodes on YouTube and to see the downloads that we've had and to hear people talking about topics that we've brought up in this podcast. And very grateful for people listening. If you have enjoyed it, the cost of our podcast is something that Reed and I have primarily footed, but we do thank those who have contributed to it. Through our podcast website, you can contribute if you wish financially. Either monthly or a one-time little thing can be done too. And we appreciate that very much. Let's see, the other things about wrap up of the season. Oh, yes, logistically, after this episode airs in May of 2025, we're going to take a little bit of a summer break, a hiatus, probably through at least June and July. We'll probably be back in August. We may be recording in the meantime, but we won't be releasing those episodes until later because do you want to talk about some special events happening or?
My baby? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that.
So I'll
I
be
wasn't
having
sure if you wanted to
I
stay
do,
here.
yeah. I'll be having a second daughter, um,
hmm
uh, toward
Which
the
is
end of.
very, very exciting.
I'm
So
I'm extremely excited.
congratulations to
Yeah,
you and Nan
yeah.
and to little Annie to become a
hmm
big sister.
Yeah,
And I am personally vicariously enjoying that you're doing
absolutely.
child raising
All right.
in such a way that I can enjoy them from a distance, and
Right.
I thoroughly do.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's I'm set to no mode right now. I've been like uh a friend reached out to me and asked if I wanted to help plan the summer summit for the
Mhm.
Hawaii Association of Language Teachers Summer Summit, and I said I'm just set to quote no unquote
Yeah. It's
mode
a
right now.
default no,
It's a
rarely
default
doing
no for
something else. Yeah.
everything, and I'm really excited about just nesting and nesting
Yes.
with the little
That's
ones
that's terrific.
and just being at home. So that's
Yeah.
that's
And
that's the
and
summer plan.
yeah, my much smaller scale, but I will be getting some baby chicks. People who maybe
Oh
have
yeah,
caught that I really like chickens.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
in a couple of weeks after I get my grades turned in, I'm going to be going and finding some baby
Oh,
chicks.
it's lovely.
And let's see, some of their names will be Sue and Meryl and Patsy. And I can't remember a couple. I'm probably getting five. Um,
Which
all
SLA
all
person is
female
Sue?
chicks.
Yeah,
Gas, Sue Gas.
Sue Gas. There you go.
I sure hope these folks don't find out that I just did this, but
The
yeah,
theme.
I always like to name my chickens for important women in history, so that I can think about those important women while I think about
Mm,
or a Jane
mm,
Austen character. Those are the two default name
yeah,
choices I have for chickens.
yeah. It's
So
a, it's
we'll both have preoccupation with young
oh yeah.
critters or
Yep.
creatures.
Absolutely. They are critters. Little
Yep.
critters. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm excited to record some episodes when we can, but then we'll start releasing them
Yep.
again in the fall.
Yep.
Mhm.
In a more regular way. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So we will be back.
Do you want to jump in?
And I think we're ready to start up so we're talking today about picture talk, which is an activity that's kind of the term that's gelled for it.
Mhm.
The idea is not just showing an image like it's a flashcard for vocabulary practice, but looking for images often that are maybe a little more complex that allow you to discuss things that might involve some new vocabulary introduction. But I even think of it in two levels, but wanted to first off clarify for people who aren't familiar with the topic of or the teaching or instructional strategy that a lot of times people will call picture talk. It's not simply looking at an image, identifying a word, and moving on to the next image. It's looking at it, it's discussing it, it's the teacher doing a lot of the talk, particularly with a novice classroom,
Yeah.
and students contributing ideas, perhaps even silently or using their languages they already know
Yeah.
so that the teacher can access those ideas and help to bring them into the new language that they're gaining through the class. So I think of it in two layers.
Mhm.
So picture talk can be very centered on just a few new words, very intentionally reusing words very close to the picture. So I did this in a webinar for Chinese language teachers not too long ago, where I had a picture of me next to a big statue of an elephant in a park in China. And if I were doing that kind of close to the vest sort of a picture talk, I would be always saying something about in the park. Who do you see in the park? Oh, is someone with me in the park?
Mhm.
And intentionally trying to recycle that word in
Mhm.
the park because one of my goals is to introduce that word
I
into
see.
their new vocabulary.
Mm.
I think of picture talk in a bigger scale, kind of a step, as maybe we're using some new vocabulary, but we're intentionally drawing on all the linguistic repertoire that the students already have. So
Yeah.
we're not just really honing in on targeting one particular
Yeah.
phrase or but really developing a whole story, perhaps imagining what could have happened before or after this picture or those sorts of things. So that's kind of the nitty gritty of the instructional activity itself. I think it's wonderful. I think it adapts really well both to novices and very advanced learners. They just take more of the lead as they have more linguistic ability and they can talk at greater length. And the teacher is doing more scaffolding and more directing and more either or questions or yes, no questions when it's a more beginner level. So I
Yeah.
use the same set of pictures across Chinese 1 through AP a
Yeah.
lot of times. It was very easy to adapt in that way.
Yeah. Pictures are actually the mode of prompt that we
Yeah.
use for our internal assessment, where I do an individual oral exam with my seniors. It's a
Hmm.
quarter of their entire IB language grade. And so they hold up two photos, and the rule is that they cannot have seen these photos before, but they'll be similar to photos we've been discussing in class.
Hmm.
I like this sort of washback effect that the IB knew that they would be putting on us by if the end
Yeah.
thing, if the big grade at the end of your entire, IB education is going to be, a quarter of that grade is going to be based on you talking about a picture, then
Hmm.
hopefully teachers
Wow.
would be using pictures in their classroom to get you, well used
Yeah.
to it. Yeah, well familiar with
Yeah.
it. Um, yeah, and there's a lot. We have sort of three steps in it. And it's in the rubrics that you talk about the concrete details of what's in the picture. Then again, this is the end assessment, so I'm not talking about
Hmm.
what to do in any given
Yeah. In your
lesson.
class
Yeah,
necessarily. Yeah.
no. Concretely what we see in the picture. Um, my own wording of what this second step is that we're speculating about what probably is going on. And
Hmm.
so if you see a girl
Yeah.
sitting
Making
alone,
some inferences about it. Yeah.
inferences. Right, right. But it's still about the picture itself. But then the third
Hmm.
part is connections to culture. And this is in the rubric and on the model teacher comments. It's, oh, this student didn't make any connections to culture. And I think they can't get more than half points if they don't make any connections to culture. Also,
Yeah.
it's the first part is a student doing their own little presentation about the picture that they have never seen before. And then the second step is a discussion back and forth with the teacher asking questions. And then the third one is another discussion, but on a different theme. We have these five themes that we talk about. And if the student doesn't mention culture in the first presentation part, I'm not allowed to bring up culture in the second and third parts. So
Wow.
we're just stuck in the concrete details, which get very limited. And
Yeah.
it's 4 minutes for the first part, 5 minutes for the second part, 6 minutes for the third part. So we're talking about 11 long minutes of
Yeah.
being stuck if the student doesn't bring up culture. But to me, that means
Wow.
that in the classroom, what are we doing? We're recycling, we're creating repertoires of what we know about society, what we know about culture, what we know about people and places, what we know about foods and history, whatever we've talked about before, that those become recycled repertoires that we keep bringing up over and over again, if we can make them relevant. And so a picture doesn't just have to be like, does he have a nose? He has a nose. Does he have
Hmm.
ears? He has ears. It's like we see that concretely in the picture. That's fine to include. I'm okay with including that. I would prefer it be interesting. It's like, why are we
Hmm.
talking about his nose? But so notable things. But then also, we can say, what might he do? And then we can play a little bit. We can say, not even in a funny, playful way, but we could just get imaginative and say, oh, maybe he's going to, get dim sum with people. It's something
Yes, with your
something
lizard person
that's
from the
like,
previous episode.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But you can tie it to Chinese culture in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
or the culture
Yeah,
that you're
that's
teaching.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. And I would say too, cultural comparisons are real key too. If you're
right. Yeah.
choosing pictures, like I often will search for pictures once in the language I teach, Mandarin Chinese, and once in English, thinking that I'm probably going to get some sources from things that might be more familiar to my English speaking majority students, and some that are going to be from a Chinese cultural context of one kind or another, or from a Chinese person taking photos of
Hmm.
anywhere in the world. And so you can kind of see a Chinese lens on what was interesting or that kind of thing. So
Literally
that,
and figuratively, a Chinese
yeah,
lens. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. I didn't do that on purpose, but
No, no.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are good ways to do that kind of cross-cultural kind of thinking too. So that intercultural competence includes an awareness of your own culture,
Yeah.
and being able to step back and think about both the
The
new and the
yeah.
one that's
This
I say new. It might be
yeah.
your heritage culture though too.
Right. The awareness of one's own culture to me is, I guess I took it for granted until I just kept teaching and realizing that um, at least Americans, and we're in the context of America here, often aren't aware of our own norms, and we
Or
won't
I
even call it culture. Like we're just
I
like, oh, I
would
don't know.
say
It's just
it's particularly so for white people in
sure.
America.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's common in places where maybe one group is more dominant,
Hmm.
whether by number, power, or influence,
Sure.
which I think is
Yeah,
the case.
yeah.
And so, like when I was teaching in Iowa, there was the idea of intercultural competence came up in a class that I taught, and some of them actually used that word. I don't have a culture,
Yeah, yeah.
and she felt sorry, kind of like, oh,
Mm.
other people are interesting, but I don't have a culture.
Right.
I'm boring,
Yeah.
white Midwestern girl,
So do you
and
not
like
eat
trying
food?
to have them
Like,
see
what do you?
themselves. Yeah,
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 yeah.
exactly.
We said trying
Do
to
you not
what?
exist?
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Trying to what themselves?
Help them
Oh,
help
oh,
those see
sure.
the culture that they're in,
Yeah,
and that's developing intercultural
yeah,
competence too. So
yeah.
those photos that bring up something like, wait, McDonald's doesn't look like that, even if you're showing them a picture of a McDonald's from China, it's different. And so it's going to cause them, hang on, like,
Yeah,
oh, you take for granted this
yeah,
that it would look like this or that.
yeah.
But look, this is a different setting. And so helping them step out of that ethnocentric
Yeah,
kind of view
it
where
is. Yeah,
I'm normal and everybody else
different
is
or
different
yeah,
or
putting in
or
effort.
interesting even in a
Yeah,
positive way. But no,
right.
I too am,
I have a culture too. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I mean, someone with if you were to just take some photos and bring them to another part of the world, it'd be like, oh, so people in Philadelphia, their sports colors are those colors. The names of their teams are those things. Oh, they eat very specific foods at their sports games, and they would say, "Oh, we don't have culture. There's no culture here." Okay, can I just randomly change the colors of your sports teams? Can I randomly
Mm,
introduce foods you're not used to? Like, obviously, you're very set in the things that you do. Those are
yeah,
your practices, products, and perspectives
yeah,
that are your culture. And so I find that, yeah, Picture Talk is a great place when we bring up food menus. I mentioned in the last episode a dim sum menu. Chicken feet come up twice. There's a red braised one and there's a white kind. And I said, I like the red braised one. I'm going to order that. And then my one student, she goes, ew, I'll never eat that. And I was like, cool, cool, cool. Um, and
nice response on your part.
yeah,
I I
I
would
was like, okay, well, I'm going to order
rub me
it,
the wrong way.
and well, it'll be a slow project for me. I'm going to work, I'm going to work on that. But when I bring up, it was actually another student in the room said it's a lot of work to get through all those bones. And I said, if chicken wings were cooked in the same way, it would be the same amount of work. That you're
Yeah,
getting a lot of breaded and sauce. There's not a lot of meat, but it's puffy because of the sauce and breading, and you're
right.
spitting out a lot of bones. Chicken wings are the exact same thing. And so
Yeah,
if wings were
they're
cooked the
very
same way,
bony.
you'd get the same thing. And often my students will start to hit a point, and I find this across society in America in general, I guess especially white people, where they'll start to say, ew, I don't want to talk about this. Why are we talking about this? So like food
Mm.
itself becomes gross to talk about just because we're not used
Hmm,
to talking about it. It's like we're eating
interesting.
wings, they come from a chicken. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. I often avoid the topic of eating chicken around you
I
because you.
understand that that is a cultural practice by many
Yes.
people.
Yes. 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 Um, okay. I'll drop that
Yeah,
one
I'm not
because
a vegan or vegetarian
yeah.
audience. But I don't eat my friends.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I
Okay.
do sometimes eat chicken. They are
Yeah.
not chickens that I know.
Right. Okay. All right. Oh, that was insensitive of me. I shouldn't have brought up chicken feet. Um,
They're a thing. They're a thing. I
yeah.
mean, people who don't eat meat at all, you want to kind of be aware
Absolutely.
of what people are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, that idea of like students, the pictures bringing out what students do is, I think, a valuable thing. I have some things on my board that I've mentioned to you before that I find more useful than calling it picture talk.
Hmm.
And so my
Right.
agenda, when students walk in, if they see lizard talk, the first time around, they'll go, "What's lizard talk?" And I go, "Okay, well, you'll see." And then I have these AI generated images of lizard people in business suits with briefcases. And what we start to get into the routine of is talking about wild, absurd information. What's in the briefcase? Oh, he keeps his brain in the briefcase. Is his brain
Yeah.
box shaped? Yeah, he's got a box shaped brain. It's the shape of
Well,
the
nice. Well, no
briefcase.
wonder
In
can't
the
fit it
yeah,
into
it's
his
yeah,
little
a
lizard
little
head
lizard
anymore.
head. Yeah,
Hmm.
and really anything's possible. It's and the students will suggest really absurd ideas, and I'll go, okay, let's go with it. It's like that's what lizard talk is for the absurd ideas.
Yeah.
And then I have another one that came up was ninth grade. We were talking about rebuilding our campus because we have a big new art building going up. It's under construction for the last year. It was relevant to talk about campus construction, and so I had a map of Mars, and it was a real map of Mars, real labels, and I had two options: there's the North Pole and the South Pole, and they got to choose the North Pole. They chose it, so a little bit of ownership there. And then with my next picture on the next slide, big close up of the North Pole of Mars. Again, places are labeled. We decided to build campuses. And so these conversations were not like lizard talk. These were very grounded, practical conversations about what facilities to build.
Hmm.
So should
Still
it have it?
imaginative, but
It's still imaginative, but
yeah.
much more on the realistic fiction side as opposed to the absurdist fiction end of the spectrum. And so they, should they have a gym? To Yuguan, Jen Ma, oh yeah, Jen to Yuguan. We're gonna build a gym. Okay, 要大大的还是小小的? Big one, a small one. At some point, one of the campuses caught fire, and then the students decided that it was a rival campus to the one that we actually are going to use. So we're like, oh no.
Ooh.
And so then I said, well, we got to help them rebuild. And so, okay, the gym, yeah, shout, a little one. And I said, hold on, guys, if we rebuild it, we get to use it. And they're like, oh, okay, da, big gym then. And we're going to have 1,000 classrooms if we get to use it. Yeah. So there was a lot of, and it was space for the students to express ownership over their
Yep.
ideas.
Yep.
They're creating the ideas, and it wasn't like
They're the
throwaway
experts.
ideas. They're the experts, and they own it. It's like after we've decided, and I can keep coming back. Okay, on GAN, I think it's a little valley or something. It was like in GAN, GAN. What was in GAN, and then we remember which campus was there. So we don't just like say random words for buildings and forget them.
Hmm.
We
This
keep
is,
coming back to like what was here again. Oh, it was the things that we decided. And so there's this ownership over ideas that continue to exist because we continue to refresh and renew them through talking about them. And so
yeah.
our imagined classroom or imagined school facilities continue to be real. You could do this with anything. I think that Mars Talk, I'll probably continue to call it Mars Talk, where it's like anything could exist on Mars. It's just going to be very grounded in reality. And
Hmm.
then my lizard talk is like anything can exist for the lizards. It's just going to be it's allowed to be very absurd. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
And that sense of clarity, I think, would be very helpful because I've found, particularly with sophomores in high school, I'll just call them out specifically. It was hard to get them to understand expectations. And so it could get extreme and like, wait, no, now this isn't the time for that level of absurdity, but I do love your imagination. So wow, yeah. So I think that's a nice feature of doing it that way.
Yeah.
Um, can I illustrate through a more simple novice level kind of a thing that I often
Yeah,
do?
and I was going to ask you if you would be willing to talk through some very micro steps that you would
Sure.
do with
Yeah.
a picture. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was thinking of one that I often have used over the past few years where I start with photos of pandas and they're often very close up. It's if someone could have seen that and thought, "Oh yeah, vocabulary practice, 熊猫, panda." Next. No. So y yes, I'm going to do that, but this is my very first lesson in a lot of cases. I could absolutely just scale it up, like mentioned, for more advanced learners, but I've often used this as the very first moments in Chinese class ever. So, and I just finished a class online a couple weeks ago that was like this. So I would show a picture of a panda and extremely slowly in Chinese. Um, and I'll say it in English just so the audience gets it, but I'm saying this in Chinese. I'll do it the Chinese after. So I'm pointing with my hand to the picture and saying, it is a panda. Like about that slow. So in Chinese, it comes off like, 它是熊猫. And I want to feel that slowness. Like it's not that the words are stretched apart from each other, but they're chunks with pauses in between so that the mind can process. And in the case of the very beginners, I'm also using the photo is in view, but I'm also using words in pinyin with right next to their English meaning. And I'm pointing my hand under the sound that they hear in pinyin and then under the English that they are now trying to interpret. So I don't have to say anything in English, but I can really hone in on what does that mean. And then I just let them kind of gel with that statement. Like, ah, and then maybe just a micro step faster. Ah, 它是熊猫. It is a panda.
Mhm.
Then I might ask a question. So, is it a panda? Is it and then where I go from that depends on the crowd. Often a question would be, am I a panda? And I wait to see, are these super, super playful people? Because if somebody says, yeah, you are, well, then I know that I might have some real characters in my class and I could pretend to be a panda or not. I typically don't, but I let students become pandas. In the case of my online class recently, one of them had a stuffed animal panda and like, oh, it is a panda. Look, Khan. And I do a big gesture and Khan, look. Um, there's panda right there. So I'm using a series of photos that have pandas in them, but then they also don't have pandas in them. And so the purpose, the communicative kind of purpose that we're doing is a little bit of maybe the playful thing if somebody decides they are also a panda. But the real science learning piece is that they find out through this a close examination of these photos. They learn about what baby pandas look like, and they look sort of like a deformo kitten. Like they do not look like an adult panda. They're not black and white when they're first born, and they have a long looking tail and they're kind of pink with white hair and they're kind of weird and their eyes are shut and they kind of squirm around. And so the first time I show this image or an image like that, often the students now are having to think about, wait a minute, in super simple language again, is it a panda? That's what I'm asking. But they have to do hard mental work like, wait a minute, what do I know about what pandas look like? This is a surprise.
Yeah.
And so, you get a debate. Okay, how many people think it is a panda? How many people think it's not a panda? And then I'll tell them, I know, 我知
Mm.
道,
Hmm.
我知道. And I have a little sign that says, I know, it is a panda. And they're like, wait a minute. And so I'll show them another picture. Ah, look. And I can start to introduce things like day one panda, day two panda, day three panda. And so they're learning about the reality of pandas through these really simple pictures, just
Hmm.
they're honed in right on the animal.
Yeah.
And I'll throw in some distractor photos of a raccoon and of a red panda. And we start to talk about, ooh, red pandas, great pandas. Are they both pandas? Yeah, they are
Yeah.
in the Chinese words too.
Yeah.
So some of those kinds of things really make it deeper than just identifying language, even though we're keeping it very simple.
Yeah.
So I super, super love it as an entry point.
Hmm.
And then to reuse that same language, we then create our own imagined panda,
Mm.
where, like you were discussing, it can be more free. It doesn't have to be super realistic at that point.
Yeah.
But when we're
So
talking about real ones, they're learning real stuff.
yeah, I think any teacher could see you starting your first day lesson that way, like total new beginners, and come in with a kind of structuralist lens
Mm.
and say, oh, so she's trying to teach these words, and not notice that there's a continuation of the topic, that you're actually building toward a focus on meaning where there is some kind of science learning going on, and that
Hmm.
your first statement there, 这是熊猫, this is a panda, is not a statement of known facts because of what comes next. And so it
Yep.
turns out that if we keep following it, it turns out that that was a lead up to something else. It was a pre thing that was getting ready for something
Hmm.
else. And that's a normal thing. Like my wife will ask me like, um, she'll know that I have a faculty meeting after school. And she'll say, "You have a faculty meeting after school today, right?" Or she'll ask me, "Do you have a faculty meeting after school today?" And I'll say, "Yeah." So in that moment, if you didn't look at what comes next, you'd say, "Oh, that was a strange interaction." Like she already knew it. Why is she
Why is she
asking?
asking you
Yeah,
display questions?
right. A display question. But no, that's a normal thing people do as a lead up to the next question. And that's in conversation analysis, they call it like a pre, I forget what they call it, a pre question. I
Question.
think it's a pre
Hmm.
question. So it's not
Yeah.
the main question yet. It's just leading up to the main question. It's like, oh, okay, just confirming that because do you want me to pick up our daughter from school today? Yeah. So it's just confirming before confirming the next thing, which might lead up to a real question or might lead up to just another confirmation. But when you start like that, it's really easy for teachers to get confused into thinking, oh, okay, she's just teaching these words, 这
Hmm.
是熊猫. And if you keep watching, you realize that no, there's a meaning being built, that it was
Right.
leading up toward the main
Yep.
thing. And
And
so,
just
yeah.
one other little note about how do I carry that out? Like I have lots of pictures. I don't know how long I'm going to talk about each one, but I find like 10 to 20 are a real nice number. And so if there's one that I want to sit on because I see there's a lot of discussion possibility, I'm seeing engagement from students, people are really responding verbally and non-verbally to this, I might stay with one for quite a while. And like we were talking about before, you might have just one picture that you're spending a half hour discussing. That's fine too. It's just about the particular goal that you have and how long you want to spend. What I like though about having many pictures is if especially if you're new to doing this, you can prepare a lot of photos and you can then switch photos when it feels kind of dead or you don't know what else to say or to ask. And it feels fresh again because you're looking at a new picture, even if you're using the same words to talk about it. So I super love it. I think it's a great entryway to using the target language communicatively and comprehensively with students. And if the Panda idea is interesting to listeners, I'll link to the Hawaii Department of Education site where there's an example unit built around this, where that would be kind of the first step, where you choose an animal that's significant in a target language community and you build a first lesson kind of along those lines, where what do they look like is the first essential question. So,
Yeah. Yep. And so coming back to the idea of purpose, communicative purpose, I I have a default. There's a key word in that definition of communication. If we follow Bill Van Patten's and the kind of history of second language acquisition research, a popular definition of communication, it's the expression, interpretation, and negotiation of meaning in a given context for a given purpose. To me, the key word is meaning. And when we talk about communication, what I look toward immediately is not are people vocalizing or are people listening. I'm not interested so much in those parts. It's to me the core of it is meaning. What meaning are we talking about? So if we're talking about communication, we're talking about meaning being given or taken or negotiated. And then the question is, are we using language to do that, or language plus, other images and things? So when we talk about communicative purpose, then I'm looking again at meaning. So I'm saying, what's the meaning of what's being talked about? And it could also be at a we call it pragmatic level or the action level. So is the teacher genuinely asking a question, or is the teacher just sometimes teachers will just say a question to just demonstrate grammar and then not even wait for an answer and just move on.
Hmm.
And I would say that's a big lack of purpose for that. It's not really a question then. You're not trying
Right.
to get an answer. So there's the in the moment purpose. In the moment communicative purpose is, are you trying to share information or get information? And then the longer term purpose would be, are we trying to learn something about the world, learn something
Hmm.
about each other, entertain each other? Um, so those can be sort of bigger level purposes. And if there's some sort of task where it's like at the end we filled out a chart to then compare
Hmm.
our answers to some other survey about other people, that could be another level of purpose.
Yeah.
But at the very minimum, I would say at the turn level, is there some purpose to it? Meaning is meaning being attended to? Is meaning being expressed and interpreted in some useful way that's going to build up next?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
So we've discussed some purposes through which like pictures become a venue for learning about the world, learning about target language communities and cultures, learning creative expression and imaginative use of creating a story. Um, did we miss any other purposes?
I guess a purpose could be preparation for something if it's really coming up. So, like in the last
Hmm.
episode, I talked about is the day I was going to bring my students to a restaurant that we had menu pictures. And
Hmm.
so we were rehearsing what we would say there, but we were genuinely going to go there. And so there was a purpose to that rehearsal.
Yep.
And so using pictures for that could happen as
Yeah.
well. I don't know if that
Yeah.
learning, there's learning about the
It's
world. I'd call that the
sharing about
world.
each other too. I mean,
Yeah.
I've used pictures that I've elicited from students, like share a photo you feel comfortable discussing with your classmates in class, and send it to me by email where we're going to use your pictures next week,
I
that kind
had
of thing. Or,
yeah, I had a failed experience with that about 10 years ago.
oh
I
yeah.
had some, I think it was 300 level University of Hawaii students. And I said, okay, sign up. I had to sign up, everyone sign up so that every week someone sends in a picture of something from your life. And so I had one it was one of the first ones I showed. It was a dog. And I thought, cool, let's talk about your dog. So I said, okay, just your Nita Goma. Is this your dog? And she goes, oh no, it's just a random one I found on the internet. So I was like,
Hmm.
oh, okay. Well, then let's
So,
imagine about it then. Okay. So I was like, how old is this dog? And she goes, oh, I don't know. I just found that picture. So I was like, okay.
yeah, didn't
What's his
work.
name? And she's like, oh, I don't know. And so it didn't go anywhere because there was no
Right.
actual connection to it. And so that made me
Yeah.
realize like there's this
And not
extra,
being willing to play with it.
it wouldn't,
It
yeah,
didn't
unwilling to
work.
play with it too.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I don't know. Or it maybe not understanding the expectations of play, which I could have supported better. I was caught off guard and not ready for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I have a new thing I do called I call it Real Talk. It's REEL. It's a photo reel from my actual weekend. And it
Oh
has
yeah.
to be something that I think would be worth sharing in English. Like sharing, it's not about language. We'll do it like a little story listening where I'm
Hmm.
just telling them about photos and they just sit back and it's just for like 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So usually if I cook something I made Gambian sijido and mapo tofu over the weekend. So I
Oh,
took some
nice.
photos of that. I did
Yeah.
hot
Chinese
pots,
dishes,
Chinese dishes.
spicy
Yeah.
ones, both of us.
Spicy. Yep. And I made some hot pot the other week. And so I took photos of the different steps of me making it. And then I just quickly just dump them from my phone into my computer, select them all and open them at once. So it's real quick to prep. I just photo dump, open it. I put them in a folder now. So that's my little photo reel. And then I call it Real Talk because it's a double meaning there. It's about reality and
Hmm.
it's my photo reel. And
Yeah.
it's the opposite of that problem of the internet dog where we have no connection to it and know nothing about it. It's the opposite of that. It was
Yeah.
literally me recently. And you get a similar effect if you said like, "Hey, you like to read newspapers. Why don't you read this newspaper from 5 months ago?" There's a
Mm.
problem of recency that makes it less relevant for newspapers, but
Yeah.
also for I think for Real Talk. It's like this is from just this weekend. And if it was from three
Right.
months ago, it would be a little stale. I don't think it would be
Yeah.
as
You
interesting
talk
to
about it
talk about.
differently, I think.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's like I just did this. Like, oh, cool. So that's for me. it's also like I like to share a little bit of, little things from my own life so students can feel a little bit of community building, a little bit of
Hmm.
connection.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually, because of that failed dog one, I stopped asking students to send in stuff because I just wasn't sure how to approach it. It's like I don't want to risk this weird thing again, and it seems like they're not comfortable sharing. So
Yeah.
maybe in the future I'll make it an optional thing. But yeah, one girl has a ranch and she has a cow. She has a baby cow, and I said, if you send me
Fun.
pictures of the baby cow, we will talk about it in class. And she never did. But another one had a kitten, and I had her bring her kitten to class, and we talked about the kitten for the
Oh,
whole class.
fabulous.
That was cool. And we took a bunch of photos of the classmates holding the kitten. And
Yeah.
so I have those photos, and we can talk about that as part of our real talk.
Hmm. And one last thing about Picture Talk. I know this has been something on an episode of, I want to say it was Diana Castro and someone talking about Picture Talk recently on, I believe, another podcast. And am I going to say it right? If it was Claudia Elliott's Growing with Proficiency, but we'll link to that because I haven't listened to that one yet, but I have seen it mentioned as being really helpful in thinking about using Picture Talk. So
Fantastic.
we'll add that one too.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, thanks, Dan.
I'm
This has
good.
been okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh,
This has been
and
fun.
just a
Yeah.
little, I realized as we were talking, I have two more of the names for my chicks,
Yeah.
Sandra, Heidi. So if you can recognize those two women from SLA,
Who's Heidi?
well, I don't know if I should give it away.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Heidi
Okay. Oh,
DeLay
okay. All right. Cool.
from back in the
Um,
70s. Yeah.
got it. Oh, very cool. Okay. You're the host. So do you want to close us
Oh,
out?
yeah. Sure. Thank you so much for listening to our episode and to this season of Conversations about Language Teaching. We'll see you in probably August of 2025.
Yeah. And in the meantime, feel free to send in questions and we can get thinking about
Absolutely.
making
Yeah, we'll
episodes
still
around your
be
questions.
around. We just won't be
Mhm.
broadcasting new episodes for a little bit,
That's right.
but
So
I'll
if you
be
get it,
checking the email and
yeah, if you get them in
mhm.
sooner, then we'll have the summer to record
Yeah.
responses to your questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.